The Arakan jungle was like a living, breathing beast, dense, wet, and full of shadows that moved even when the wind was still. Thick trees, entwined like ancient warriors in a death grip, blocked the sun. The ground was soft, sometimes sticky, sometimes dry, as if confused whether to welcome or trap the soldiers walking over it. Lance Corporal Arjun Malik had grown used to the jungle's breath, its strange rhythm, and its smells, rotting foliage, wet moss, gun oil, and death. The war had changed everything. 3 years ago, he had been a schoolteacher in Punjab, proud of his books and his chalkboard. Now he carried a rifle, marching through the Burmese wilderness, part of the British Indian Army. That morning his unit, 2nd Battalion 4th Gurkha Rifles, had been pushing cautiously through a narrow trail carved between the thick bamboo groves of the Arakan region. The mission was simple on paper, recon and secure. But in the jungle, nothing was simple. The path ahead curved like a snake, flanked by ridges and tall trees. Perfect terrain for an ambush. And the enemy knew it. The first explosion came without warning. A thunderous roar shattered the stillness. Earth erupted ahead, sending dirt, shrapnel, and bits of bark flying through the air. Screams followed. Men hit the ground instinctively, rifles raised, eyes wide. Arjun's ears rang from the blast, and before he could make sense of it, the second explosion tore through the left flank. Japanese soldiers emerged from the foliage like ghosts, their faces streaked with mud, their rifles spitting death. The jungle echoed with chaos, machine gun fire, shouted commands, and the gut-wrenching cries of wounded men. Arjun dove behind a tree trunk, trying to spot the attackers. His commanding officer, Captain Wilson, was yelling orders, waving for the men to regroup. But just as he turned, a burst of bullets hit him square in the chest. He collapsed in the mud, motionless. Panic surged. Arjun tried to crawl toward a wounded comrade screaming for help, but a grenade exploded nearby, throwing him backward. Everything went black for a moment. When he opened his eyes, the jungle was silent again. Smoke hung low like a poisonous fog. The trees, once so vibrant, now looked wounded. Branches broken. Leaves burnt. The trail was a mess of bodies, some still twitching, some horrifyingly still. Arjun's ears buzzed. He reached for his rifle, but it was gone. His hands were shaking, his uniform torn and bloodied. A sharp pain shot through his left leg, a gash deep and bleeding, probably from shrapnel. Crawling to a ditch, he collapsed beside a fallen soldier. He didn't recognize the face. Maybe from another unit. It didn't matter. They were all brothers in this madness. For hours he lay still, listening for footsteps, for voices, for anything. But there was only the sound of birds, eerily calm, as if the jungle had already moved on. He thought of home. His mother praying at dawn. His younger brother teasing him for becoming a soldier. His father's quiet pride. Was this how it ends? Alone, forgotten, on a nameless path in a foreign jungle? When the sky began to darken, Arjun decided he couldn't wait for rescue. There was no backup. No one had come. Perhaps no one would. He tore a strip of cloth from a fallen soldier's shirt and wrapped it tightly around his bleeding leg. With the help of a broken branch, he stood. Pain screamed through his nerves, but he clenched his jaw and took a step. Then another. The jungle, now silent witness to the massacre, offered no comfort. Every bush seemed to hide a rifle. Every rustle was a footstep. He knew the Japanese were nearby, hunting survivors, setting traps. He couldn't risk the trails. He would move through the trees. Before leaving the clearing, he turned back for a final look. Smoke still rose from the path. The bodies of his comrades, men who had shared stories, laughter, fears, now lay twisted in death. He saluted them in silence. Then he vanished into the jungle, one slow, agonizing step at a time. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew one thing: he would not die here. Not like this. 3 days passed in fever and shadows. Arjun moved slowly, surviving on rainwater and stolen fruit. Each step was agony. The wound in his leg turned purple. Leeches clung to his skin. He dreamed of fire and gunshots, and the faces of his comrades. Then, on the 4th day, he heard a voice, a groan barely human. Pushing through the undergrowth, he found a British radio operator, Private Thomas Bell, lying beside a shattered transmitter. His face was pale. A bullet had grazed his ribs. He was barely conscious. Arjun didn't hesitate. Despite his own injury, he dragged the man to shelter, dressed the wound with a piece of gauze, and gave him the last of his water. Neither of them spoke. Language wasn't necessary. War had already introduced them. Night came with monsoon rains. Thunder cracked above like artillery. Arjun huddled close to Thomas, keeping him warm, shielding the wound. That was when she appeared. A girl no older than 17, barefoot and soaked, stood just beyond the trees. She wore a white wrap stained with mud. A bamboo basket hung from her shoulder. She said nothing, only stared. "Friend," Arjun said, raising his empty hands. She stepped forward slowly. Her name was Nandar, a local from a nearby village burned to the ground by Japanese troops. Her family was dead. She was hiding in the jungle, surviving like an animal. But she helped them, gave them food, herbs, water, and then she disappeared into the jungle again. The trio became unlikely allies. Nandar returned each day, bringing leaves to reduce fever and roots to eat. Arjun's leg healed slowly. Thomas regained strength. In exchange, Arjun fixed her father's old rifle. Thomas showed her how to use Morse code. They taught each other small words in broken Burmese and English. For a moment, war faded beneath the trees. But peace was brief. One night, the jungle lit with fire. Japanese patrols close. Nandar had been seen helping a soldier. She ran to Arjun's camp breathless, whispering only one word. "Run!" They fled through the rain. Gunfire chased them. Thomas limped. Arjun carried him part of the way. Behind them, the jungle burned. The place they had hidden for weeks was gone in moments. Exhausted, the three stumbled upon an old Buddhist shrine hidden near a river. Its stone face was cracked with age, moss growing from its eyes. Nandar said this place was sacred, no soldier would defile it. They rested there. For 2 days. Thomas wrote a message on a spare battery. Coordinates for Allied command. Arjun knew he had to deliver it. Nandar, hesitant, drew a rough map in the mud. There was a hidden trail through the riverbed that would lead to an old British supply route. But it would take a full day's walk. With his wound, Thomas couldn't come. That night, under a canopy of stars and insects, Arjun faced a choice. Leave Thomas behind and try to reach Allied forces, or stay, knowing all three might die. Nandar said nothing. She only placed her hand over Arjun's and nodded. It was his decision. Before dawn, Arjun whispered something to Thomas. "I'll come back. I swear it." He took the message and left. The journey was a nightmare. Arjun's leg throbbed. The riverbed was slippery and full of hidden dangers, snakes, enemy patrols, the terrain itself. Halfway through, he was spotted by a Japanese scout. A bullet grazed his shoulder. He ran, fell, got up, kept running. Bloodied and soaked, he reached a ruined bridge where British troops had once passed. Bones littered the path, remains of soldiers who hadn't made it. He dropped to his knees and raised the message in the air when he saw an Allied jeep in the distance. A voice shouted, "Soldier, hold on." Then everything went black. When Arjun awoke, he was in a field hospital. Bandaged. Safe. But his first question wasn't, "Am I alive?" It was, "Where's Thomas?" It took 3 days for the rescue team to find the shrine. They found blood, a burned scarf, and a broken rifle. No bodies. Nandar and Thomas had vanished. Some said they were taken by the Japanese. Others believed they escaped deeper into the jungle. But Arjun never saw them again. India was now free. Arjun, older and married, lived in Delhi. He rarely spoke of the war. But sometimes, late at night, he would sit under the neem tree in his courtyard, holding an old radio part wrapped in cloth. His daughter once asked him, "Papa, who taught you Burmese?" He smiled. "An angel in white." It was 1948. The British Empire was retreating, and India was now free. Cities echoed with new hopes, new governments, new flags. But for Arjun Malik, now a civilian living in the quiet lanes of Delhi, freedom had come with a silence too heavy to celebrate. He lived in a modest house with his wife Mira and their young daughter Sana. To neighbors, Arjun was just another government clerk, a man who walked with a slight limp and rarely smiled, but always paid his bills on time and spoke with calm politeness. No one saw the war still breathing inside him. Every morning, Arjun sat on the veranda with a steaming cup of chai and a newspaper he barely read. And every evening, he sat beneath the old neem tree in his courtyard, a habit he'd never broken since returning from Burma. In his hands, wrapped in an oilcloth, was a small piece of a broken radio part, an object he'd carried for years, hidden from everyone. He never spoke of the jungle, of the ambush, of the days spent fleeing death. Not to Mira, not even to himself. But sometimes, late at night, when Sana would crawl into his lap and ask curious questions, he let his mind drift back, not to the gunfire, not to the blood, but to the faces. He remembered Thomas Bell, the British radio operator with the wry grin who had refused to die. He remembered Nandar, the Burmese girl with quiet eyes, who had appeared from the forest like a ghost and saved them more than once without ever asking for anything in return. He remembered the shrine by the river, the smoke rising behind them, the promise he made. "I'll come back. I swear it." But he hadn't. When Allied soldiers had returned to that jungle shrine weeks later, they'd found signs of struggle. Blood on the stone floor, a broken rifle, a tattered scarf. No bodies. No footprints. Just silence. Some believed Thomas and Nandar had been captured. Others whispered that they'd escaped deeper into the jungle, surviving off the land. Arjun had asked the search team to go back twice, but each time they came back empty-handed. He never stopped wondering, never stopped blaming himself. One afternoon, Sana sat beside him under the neem tree and asked, "Papa, how do you know Burmese words? You never went to school there." He smiled faintly, touched the broken radio part in his pocket, and replied, "An angel in white taught me." She didn't understand, and he didn't explain. Some memories weren't meant to be shared. They were meant to be carried, like burdens, like blessings. Because war didn't end when the guns went silent. It lived on in the quiet, in the shadows, in the spaces between ordinary days. And so Arjun lived, never fully free but never entirely lost. Because even though the jungle had taken many things from him, it had left him with something that could never be destroyed. The memory of courage in silence.